Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today we have a great show for you. We have a packed schedule. The big news of the day coming out of the NFL is Justin Fields. Obviously, the big story of the offseason with the Bears having the number one overall pick again. What the Bears are going to do with him. We'll talk a little bit about that today. We'll also talk about the College Football Playoff Committee voting to expand the playoffs from 4 to 12 teams unanimously. We'll talk about the impact of that, how it's exactly going to work, and what it could look like down the line. We'll also talk about a little bit of MLB expansion. There was an article from Jet Passon that came out today talking about the possibility of MLB expansion. We'll get to that in a little bit. And we will close out the show talking about sports betting. Revenues came in. It was a record-setting year. We'll talk about how big of a deal it is having it more and more popularized. So without further ado, but before we get into it, remember, if you would like to be a part of the show, you can leave a tip by going to streamelements.com/GSMCsportsnetwork/tip. Again, that's streamelements.com/GSMCsportsnetwork/tip. That will leave your message going across the screen, get a part of the show. You can also leave a comment in the YouTube comment section. I have my eyes on that for you. Without further ado, let's get right into our first topic today, which is Justin Fields and the Bears. For the second year in a row, Justin Fields, the Bears have the first overall pick in the NFL draft. And for the second year in a row, the main topic of conversation surrounding the NFL offseason is what to do with Justin Fields. Now, last year, obviously, we remember that the Bears decided to give him one more chance, and they traded away that number one overall pick to the Panthers for what turned into this year's number one overall pick. So, a good decision then. But this year's quarterback class is a lot stronger than last year's quarterback class. We're talking about Caleb Williams, a guy who is hyped up to be a generational prospect, versus Bryce Young, who seems to be a fine NFL quarterback. You obviously have C.J. Stroud, who went off this last season, but he was not really in conversations to go one overall. So, you have these guys in Caleb Williams and Drake May and Jaden Daniels, a really, really, really nice top class. And the big news today is that Justin Fields is no longer following the Bears on social media. Now, you can take that however you want to take that. You can take that as gospel that it's done, it's over, that there's no shot of him coming back. He unfollowed the Bears on Instagram. It's done. Or you can take it as nothing. And I think there's valid points to both sides of those arguments. You know, you look at one side, obviously, the writing on the wall is there. Anyone that's paying attention to the NFL offseason can see plain as day the writing on the wall saying, Justin Fields, you're out of there. And him unfollowing just adds fuel to the fire. On the other hand, it's social media, right? We've seen players do this before. Stephon Diggs comes to mind. He's unfollowed the Bills on multiple occasions, changed his poster in the background, done all these things, gotten everyone in a tizzy. But he's still there, right? And that situation is obviously a little bit different than this one, where in this one, Justin Fields is fighting to stay, presumably. He's fighting to stay as the quarterback for the Chicago Bears. Now, why he unfollowed, we don't know. right? That's just one of those mysteries that we don't know. But also, I'm of the mindset here that it's not that big a deal that he unfollowed, because the writing is on the wall there. You have a generational prospect right there in your laps in Caleb Williams. If the Bears front office are to pass him up for Justin Fields, not to throw any shade at Justin Fields here, but he had a whole year to prove that he was the guy. He had a whole year to do it. And he showed glimpses there around the end of the season, but he didn't do enough. He didn't do enough to justify the Bears front office saying he is our guy, we will pay him like our guy. There's a lot of factors here. First of all, drafting Caleb Williams, it resets the clock on that franchise, right? Instead of having to pay your franchise quarterback their, generational wealth money, like all quarterback contracts are, now that the cap is $250 million. Instead of having to pay him right now or next year, you have 4 years around a guy that is supposed to be an elite quarterback. Now, downside is he's not proven. He's not a proven commodity. You do not know what he is. You know what Justin Fields is. Do you want to go with the evil you know or the evil you don't? It's a big decision to make. But also, if I'm that front office and any of those guys in this draft become what they are hyped up to be, and I stuck with Justin Fields, it's going to be one of those decisions that we look back on in 5 years and laugh. Kind of like Mitch Trubisky famously being taken over Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. Ryan Leaf. There are examples of these decisions living in infamy, and you don't want that happening again. You don't want that happening when you have the chance to do this, right? As that front office person, as that GM, you put yourself in those shoes. You didn't draft Justin Fields. Do you want to put your career on him? Or do you want to put your career on a guy in Caleb Williams or Drake May, if you like him more, that you scouted, that you chose? So there's a lot of different arguments here. I've heard comparisons all day, all over sports media, likening this to a presidential political race. And I think that's a very apt comparison. You have the Justin Fields party and the Caleb Williams party. And both of them have valid points, but only one of them's gonna win. And right now, it seems as if, at least in my mind, they're leaning towards Caleb Williams. And him unfollowing the Bears is just a sign of that, a symptom of it, not really a catalyst, like a lot of people are overreacting on the internet about, but more like a sign. The other part of it is that I'm not sure if people are understanding, is that it's going to be a trade to get him out of here. So the other part of this social media aspect is everyone saying, oh, he doesn't follow the Bears, but he does follow Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts and Drake London. He's going to the Falcons. And that is ridiculous. He doesn't have that power to decide. Now, maybe if he was a free agent, maybe if he was in, let's say, a Kirk Cousins type situation, he gets to choose where he goes. He unfollows the Bears and he follows all these guys on the Falcons. then this is a much different story. Then this is a story that you're looking at and you're saying, "Oh, maybe this does have some merit behind it. Maybe this does have some legs and we should keep a closer eye on it." But for a guy that's either going to get traded or stay on his team for one more year, who he follows on social media really doesn't matter. Because his fate is up to the Bears, up to that Bears front office. So, for everyone looking for a hint of what the Bears are going to do, as it is the biggest story of the offseason, this is the draft. The Bears are currently on the clock, and this is part of it. They have months to make this pick. They have months and months. They know they're the number one overall pick. They have been on the clock since January. So, all of this is the draft process. Might seem completely adjacent to it, but it's all part of it as well. So what we do with Justin Fields here, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts here on what you would like to see the Bears do with Justin Fields. Because I personally feel very strongly that as good as he is, as good of a talent as he is not good enough to keep over Caleb Williams. Because really anything Justin Fields can do, Caleb Williams can do too. That's my breakdown of watching both of these guys play. Justin Fields might be a little bit better with his legs, but Caleb Williams can run around like Fields can and make those plays out of structure, make those plays behind an awful offensive line like we've seen him do in college all year. Make those plays with his legs. We've seen him be able to do that. It's not something that isn't part of his game. It's not as big a part of his game as Justin Fields, but it's there. He has the ability to do it. On the other hand, we have the arm talent, and it's not to say that Justin Fields doesn't have the arm. He and DJ Moore, if you look at DJ Moore's numbers, which as much as they're his numbers, they're also a part of the quarterback's numbers, he set career highs in everything. Every major receiving stat. He set his own career highs with Justin Fields. So Justin Fields has the ability with the arm, but it's not the same as Caleb Williams. What he has in that arm talent, it's something different. It's something that we don't see a lot. He's very special arm talent. He's a very special player, and Justin Fields just doesn't clear that bar to not only play, to keep him above him, but to pay him 4 years earlier for a team that the Bears really aren't ready to compete yet. And they know that. They know they're not ready to compete yet, which is why they have this number one overall pick, which is why they're going to end up trading Justin Fields. And we look at the compensation here. The compensation here, you're looking at a second or a third round pick. You're not getting it back. He's a special player. You go look at the plays that he's able to make out of structure behind a really not good offensive line at USC, Caleb Williams. You look at what he's able to do behind that. You watch some of his scramble drills behind there, and then the crazy arm angles, making throws 50 yards down the field. It's something that most people can only dream of doing. Talking about Caleb Williams here, but we have it's the biggest decision of the offseason. It's the biggest decision of the draft. So you have to weigh all your options carefully. And you have to make sure that you're getting the best value, what's best for your team. And I just don't think there's enough upside in keeping Justin Fields as opposed to trading him, getting an extra pick, and going with someone like Caleb Williams. If you stick around for our next segment, we will be talking about the college football expansion, what that means for the future of college football, and how exactly it's going to work. We will be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't need shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't replaced all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for sticking through that break. If you are new here, we just finished talking about Justin Feilds, everything that's been going on with him, and what the Bears might do with that first overall pick. We will keep covering that story as it develops. Remember, if you would like to leave a tip or donation here for the stream, all you need to do is go to streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork/tip. Again, that's streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork/tip. Your message will come across the screen, and we will be answering that right away. But here in the second segment, I want to talk about the news of college football playoffs officially being expanded to 12 teams. Earlier today, it came out in unanimous votes by the College Football Playoff Committee that they had approved the switch from 4 to 12 teams, or in the playoff in the new college football playoffs. The way that the format is going to work is it's going to be a 5+7 system. So the first 5 teams are going to be the highest ranked conference champions, and the top 4 are going to get byes. So most likely going to be the Power 4, now that the Pac-12 is no longer a football league. So Power 4 conferences are probably going to get the byes, that being the Big Ten, the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12. They're going to get those byes, and there's going to be one group of 5 with an auto bid. That's going to be the highest ranked team that wins their conference. So we're looking at most likely a team from either the American or the Sun Belt, or this year I believe it would have been Liberty, an independent school. But outside of that, it would be the next 7 highest ranked teams. So say that the top 4 are all division conference winners, then you would get teams 5 through 11, or however that would work. The next 7 ranked teams would get into the playoffs. This has been a discussion for a while of what to do here with the college football expansion, whether or not it's worth it to have more than 12 teams. And it's been a very heated debate. It came to a head this year with Florida State getting excluded from the playoffs, even though they were a undefeated Power 4, Power 5 conference champion. They won the ACC. They were 13-0. They were a little banged up, but they got jumped by Alabama and Texas, who did not go undefeated. So there were a lot of gripes made over that, uh, and there's been other, you know, gripes made in the past for expanding it, and it seems to have a lot of support behind it, expanding. But there's ups and downs to this. You know, we go back. The college football playoff has been a thing since 2014. So 10 years of the current four-team college football playoff model. Before that, it was just a championship game. Before the top two teams, for the top two teams to play for the for the championship. And even before that, there wasn't even a game. They just picked a winner. So there's been a history of expansion, and each time it's been a good thing. But this one's been probably the most heated of the expansion debates because moving to 12 teams really what it's done is, as a byproduct of this whole college football playoff system, is devalue bowl games. And we see that already with the four-team college football playoff, how little bowl games seem to matter to programs anymore, to players in these programs. Everyone's skipping their bowl games. It's not a big deal. Coaches are leaving before the bowl games are done. Players are entering the portal before the bowl games are happening. Everything is just a mess with the bowl system. And that's not just because of the college football playoff. It has a lot to do with the transfer portal taking over college football. Is really a whole new sport since that's been added in. But the expansion to 12 teams is probably a good move. 12 is a lot of teams. If I was doing it, I'd probably move it to 8 before I moved it to 12. But what 12 does do is it allows these group of 5 schools to get a bid, which, as much as they aren't at the same level as these Power 5 schools, I mean, there are group of 5 teams that deserve the chance to compete in these playoffs. A little biased maybe here for me, but James Madison was a very good football team this year. It has been for a while. You've seen that Tulane team. They won their New Year's Six Bowl just a couple years ago against one of these Power 5 teams. So there are some very, very good group of 5 teams, and it's good to get this representation. Expanding to 12 teams gives you more of a chance of having Cinderella runs. Now, in football, it's going to be a lot harder than in basketball to have these Cinderella runs happen, but it makes it more accessible for these programs, so it doesn't feel like it's just these same 4 that are running college football. But there's also some negatives to it. As much as expanding it is a good thing for now, you don't want to get to the point where it is a March Madness size playoff. It works in basketball. Because it's such a unique tournament, and basketball is the sport that's perfect for it. You can play that many games. Football is too much to keep expanding these playoffs. You're going to get to the point where, and this is something that the NCAA needs to check themselves on, you're going to get to the point where they're going to want to expand this again. And it's only been 10 years since the last expansion. It's only been 10 years since they moved it to 4 teams, and they've already moved it up to 12. You don't want to get to a point where the NCAA is getting money hungry again and makes this a 24 team playoff, expands it to all of that top 25. It is a foreseeable future that I can see happening, and it's not a good one. 12 is already pushing it, to be honest. 12 is a lot of teams in the playoffs, especially the way that it is gonna be set up. I know there's a million teams in college football, but 12 is a lot of teams, and that's a lot of extra games to have these kids play. But overall, this move is a positive move. Overall, expanding to 12 teams, it's going to shine some light on, especially for those group of 5 schools. And I think that is the biggest positive in all of this, that there will be a group of 5 team in these playoffs every year. Giving the group of 5 some love is really big for the sport of college football. The group of 5 really is what's keeping college football, I think. The SEC and the Big Ten have become this huge kind of corporation. You see they've come together and they've made some coalition here recently. And they're kind of setting up to fight the NCAA a little bit. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. The NCAA has not been the greatest organization. But having college football be college football and not be the NFL light is something that's really important. There's a reason that there are college football fans and they're different from NFL fans. They're the same sport, but they're different. They have different cultures and different vibes and aesthetics around each other, around the game itself. And if you keep on corporatizing college football, you keep adding more and more kind of free agent type stuff, you're going to lose that bond that fans have with the players. I don't mind the transfer portal that much, but it can get out of hand, and it's starting to get a little bit out of hand, where now you're only having players show up for 1 year before leaving, and they're doing this at every single school. They've gotten rid of the restriction that's making them sit out a year if they transfer more than once. So it's only going to get more. And I understand the game has to evolve. But the transfer portal is kind of threatening and college football as it is. It's changing the game. It's making it almost completely a new game. It adds that kind of free agency that you don't see in really in most other collegiate sports. And it's part of it. It is. I think the transfer portal really is a positive thing for the game in general, but it can get out of hand. It can get to the point where you have these guys that jump ship year after year, and you can get to the point where teams are there 1 year, they have success, especially if it's a group of 5 program, and then they get torn to shreds by these bigger ones. And it's hard for them to build out of the hole because they're losing all of these big players, all of these people that can help their program succeed. So having the playoff expand is going to help, especially with that group of 5 school that makes it. It's going to help draw people to those group of 5 schools as opposed to away from them. But yeah, the college football playoff has expanded. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on what you think are going to be the ramifications of this before we move into our next segment, which will be talking about Major League Baseball possible expansions. Stick around for the next segment. We will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for sitting through that quick little break here. As I said, we will be covering the possible MLB expansion, the article that Jet Passon just put out today on ESPN. But before we do, remember that if you want to be a bigger part of this show, leave a tip or donation. Have your message come across the screen. All you need to do is go to streamelements.com/GSMCsportsnetwork/tip. Again, streamelements.com/GSMCsportsnetwork/tip to be a bigger part of the show. But like I said, we're going to be covering the possibility of MLB expansion. Jet Passon, MLB writer for ESPN, put out an article today saying it's the second longest period in MLB history since its expansion. It's been almost 30 years since the league last expanded, that being in 1998 with the Diamondbacks and the Rays. And moving this league up to 32 teams is something that hasn't really been in conversation. Hasn't really been in conversation this entire time. There's been some conversation with the A's attempted move to Vegas, with the Rays attempting to play half of their season up in Canada. But there hasn't really been a lot of expansion talk. There has been some relocation talk. And the A's seem like they're going to move to Vegas, although that is a mess. That's a whole nother story, what's going on in there. But there's a couple pretty good candidates for places to have these new MLB teams. Some you might expect, some that could be good, some that you have never thought of. But yeah, we'll start with some of the more reasonable candidates, some that Jet Passon brings up here in his article. The first one here is Nashville, Tennessee. In Nashville, Tennessee, obviously, very big sports city. They already have a football team there. They have a basketball team down the road in Memphis. And they're a team that can support these professional leagues, professional teams. They have a big baseball following with Vanderbilt, one of the best college baseball teams in the nation, already there. So they have a foothold in baseball. So adding a team there makes a lot of sense. Around a lot of other teams, not around too many other teams, I should say. Aside from the Nationals up in Washington, D.C., and the Braves over there in Atlanta, there's kind of a dead zone right in that area around the central East Coast. There's not that many teams right there. So adding another team there, there's a lot of floating fans I know the Braves have a big foothold up in that area, and even the Phillies and Pirates and Nats out there to some extent. But adding a baseball team up there, there's a lot of floating fans in that area to take a hold of. So that's a very, very attractive option. Again, a big city that has shown that it can support sports teams. The other main city that Jet Passon mentions here in this article is Salt Lake City, Utah. Now, we look at a map again of where all 30 MLB franchises are. There's nothing out there in the middle of the country. You get to California, there's a couple teams, there's one in Arizona, but there's nothing in the middle there. Now the A's move into Vegas. That will help it move a little bit more towards that area. But Utah has a professional sports team in the Jazz. They have a minor league team that they can support, and they have been lobbying for a MLB team. It is a smaller market, but it's something that they've proven that they can support a team for with the Jazz. Now, there are a lot of other options. You could go and try to expand the game outside of the U.S. You could go back to a place in Canada where they haven't had baseball in a while. You had the Montreal Expos, you have the Toronto Blue Jays right now, but the Expos haven't been there for a while, and they have proven that they can host these teams. Or maybe you go up to Vancouver and put a team over there. There's been reports of Montreal especially trying to get a baseball team back. We mentioned the Rays attempting to play half their season up in Canada. That was up there in Montreal. So adding a new team in there, maybe bringing back the Expos since they've moved to Washington, and restarting that franchise as the 31st team, it might be a nice little fit up there. Or maybe, again, staying out of the country, there's a lot of Latin American players. You go start a team in Puerto Rico maybe, or the Dominican Republic, where many of these players are from. You can get a bigger foothold than you already have in some of these Latin American countries to get that talent, spread the game of baseball even more than it already has. And it's not even that far. You go, Puerto Rico is not that far from Miami, where you already have a baseball team. You go set up a team there. It's not like the travel's going to be insane. It's not going to be any more crazy than it is for the Mariners up there in Seattle, which, if you have seen their travel logs, what they have to do every single year, the amount of miles that they log up from the Pacific Northwest is crazy. But getting a team down there in Puerto Rico, you already have a lot of people that are huge baseball fans. And you can help expand it outside of the U.S. just a little bit. But then we also have to ask the question of, will the MLB expand? Like Jet Passon mentions in this story, it's been almost 30 years. This is the longest drought of adding new baseball teams since the 60-year stretch from 1901 to 1961, when they expanded from the original 16 teams to 18. And ever since then, they've been slowly expanding it until they hit those 30 teams in 1998. And it is unlikely to happen right now, because there's a lot of other things going on in baseball. A lot of bigger issues, a lot of more pressing matters. Rob Manfred doesn't seem like he has any intent in expanding right now. The Diamond Sports Group has gone bankrupt. They had the local television for about half of the league. And local television is a huge part of money in the MLB. It's where teams like the Yankees make so much money with their Yes Network. The Nationals and the Orioles were in a fight for years, bordering on a decade, I believe, a legal battle over MASN, the local sports network that broadcast their game. And Boston obviously has NESN. That's where a lot of these teams make a lot of their money. And having that, as well as we mentioned, the Oakland A's being a whole mess, trying to move to Las Vegas, not having a stadium, they're basically homeless right now. They did not re-sign with the Oakland Coliseum, and they don't have a stadium yet in Vegas. It's been a journey to get to even this point with them. So having a homeless team, having collective bargaining coming up in a second, expansion isn't right on the table. But there's a lot of good spots all around the United States for MLB teams. Because expansion has been a big topic in almost every other major sport. If not expansion, then, relocation. We have this conversation with the NBA. They're on the verge of expanding. We have this conversation with the NFL. They're probably not about to expand, but there's conversation there. So why not the MLB? Why can't the MLB expand for the first time in 30 years? I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts here. Where do you think a good spot for an expansion team would be? Do you think the MLB should expand? Do you think it's a good idea for them to do this now? If you do, why? If not, why not? Me personally, I think it would be a great thing for them to expand. The MLB needs to get itself into more markets, and maybe going to a place, like I said, outside of the U.S. You go back to Montreal, maybe Mexico City or Puerto Rico. There's a lot of good options out there. But right around the next break, we will wrap up our show talking about the influx of sports betting coming into the industry, coming in, expanding itself. It's a big expansion show. So stick around. We will be right back. Welcome back, everybody, for our final segment. If you missed the beginning of the show, you can always go check it out on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere where you find podcasts. This will be uploaded later tonight. But if you missed it, we talked about Justin Feilds, drama with him that came out earlier today, and what the Bears may or may not do with that first overall pick. We talked about expansion. It's been a big expansion show, and it will continue to be a big expansion show for our final segment. But we talked about college football expansion with the playoffs, and we talked about the possibility of MLB expansion. Remember that if you would like to be a bigger part of the show here, all you need to do is leave a tip or donation, have your message come across the screen for everyone to see. You go to streamelements.com/GSMCsportsnetwork/tip. Again, streamelements.com/GSMCsportsnetwork/tip. Continuing with our theme of expansion, we're going to talk about the sports betting industry. Unless you've been under a rock for the last year, sports betting has had a major impact all across the sporting world. In fact, it posted a record revenue of $11 billion in 2023. 11 billion with a B. This is with them not even being legal in all 50 states yet. Slowly but surely, they're expanding. They're expanding to, they're most likely going to be in all 50 states within the next by the end of the decade. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is something to keep an eye on, because the legalization of sports gambling, while it comes with its positives, while it comes with its financial and entertainment positives, there's a lot of negatives with it as well. Not just as a society getting more into gambling or gambling addictions or stuff like that. That's obviously a part of it as well, but that's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about its impact on the sporting world specifically. And we've already started to see some of that impact. There's been a multitude of high-level suspensions for sports gambling already. You know, Calvin Ridley, probably the most high-profile one in the NFL, was suspended for a year for gambling. There were a bunch of Lions players before this most recent season that got suspended for gambling. And there's been some college players and stuff that have been suspended for gambling, kicked off teams. So, first step in this impact sphere we're going to look at is athletes. Because if there's one thing that sports have to be in the industry, to be the sport that they are, it needs to have integrity. And having your players gamble on it, which is why it's such a big deal to have these sports leagues, and why they're cracking down on it. Without integrity, the sports that we have, they turn into shows. Not that they aren't already entertainment, but they turn into shows rather than games. You know, wrestling is entertainment, but it's not a sport, right? Because it's scripted. It doesn't have that integrity to be a sport. So sports gambling has the impact to completely change what the game is. and you have to be careful around it. Almost every single league now has an official sports gambling partner. Now, the NBA has DraftKings. I believe the NFL is FanDuel. They all have these official sports gambling partners, and you have some of these teams even getting it in the stadiums, which, like I said, is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something to keep an eye on. Having these sports gambling companies already with their hands in the pockets of the league, or the league having their hands in the pockets of these sports gambling companies, it's sort of a yellow flag right now. Like, nothing is wrong yet, but it could become a bigger issue further down the line. Now, it was reported that sports gambling posted $11 billion, that's a record revenue, in 2023. They expanded to states like Ohio, who fell in love with sports gambling. But, it's up to 38 states now. Or, I guess, mobile betting is legal in 30 states. It's also it's just so adding these, it's gonna be more and more profitable as time goes on, because they're just gonna get more and more customers. And it's not just the sports leagues that we need to keep an eye on, it's also sports coverage, and you start to see it change a little bit already. ESPN, for example. And this is one of those things that I feel really icky about. ESPN launched ESPN Bet. And for as much of a monopoly as ESPN has on cable sports coverage, they are the sports coverage place. They're the biggest places for sport. And they're a sports book now. It's one of those things that, like I said, it's not an issue yet. But having it so tightly tied in to the information we have, the way we analyze the information, being so tied into the game itself, is a slightly concerning thing. Especially when what you're gambling on is being covered and by these networks, is where we're getting the information to be smarter gamblers about. You have issues like on draft night, NBA draft night. Shams Charania, NBA insider, is a FanDuel partner. And he had a report, breaking news as an insider, that I believe something with Scoot Henderson either going second or third. And that didn't end up happening. And it changed the lines. That tweet single-handedly cost people money and won the sports book a lot of money. And it wasn't on purpose. It was the information he got. That's been cleared. But situations like this are already starting to happen. And with the wider and wider legalization of sports gambling around the country, it's only going to become a more pressing issue. It's only going to become a bigger issue in the spotlight. You already see coverage start to change. It used to be taboo, I guess, to talk about sports gambling live on air. when I was growing up, just 10 years ago, there was a radio host that would talk about it late at night, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. It's the only time I ever heard about sports gambling. No one on any major TV networks or radio networks would talk about sports gambling. But now if you turn on any show, you open up any app, go to any website, at the bottom of it they have lines. They have the money line, they have the spread, they have the over-under. You go turn on ESPN and they're giving you analysis about who's going to win the Super Bowl, and then they flash up the odds for a player. They say, I'm going to bet this. It's already changed the coverage in just really the last 4 years, the really last 5 years. The coverage has changed this drastically to not only have sports betting be a part of the coverage, a part of the analysis, but kind of central to it. And this is before ESPN launches their sportsbook. This is before all these places have their own sportsbook. Fanatics, the website that makes and sells merch, has a sportsbook now. It's getting slightly concerning to me. And they're going to keep posting record earnings as they keep expanding. Like I said, expansion, it's a big part of this show. Sports betting is going to continue to make record revenue. These companies are going to rake in the cash as they expand. So this number, this 11 billion number, this isn't close to their ceiling. This is much closer to their floor of what you can expect them to make every single year. It's a bit concerning to me, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, but how prevalent it is right now in the world of sports, and it's fine. I partake in sports gambling every once in a while, but to have it be so front and center in coverage, so in your face in this coverage, is one of those things that has a really, really slippery slope. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We will be back tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Until then, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired.